then you may show that you have a zero credit score on there as well. So that's definitely something to look out for when you're talking about dealing with your credit. So that's another question that we had. So what are the score factors? What are the score factors? What's the factors that make up your credit score? The five pillars of credit. That's what they're referring to when that question is asked. What are the five? Well, most people don't know that there are five or six or three or four or whatever it is, but there are five pillars of credit. So you know what those are. We've gone over them extensively, each one individually, and talked about them for an entire show and crammed all five of them in at one point in time as well. So the five pillars of credit. The very first thing is what? It's your payment history. How well do you pay the creditors that show up on your credit report? That's the very first pillar. It's also the one with the most weighting. So a lot of people actually think that if I just make my payments on time, then I've got a great credit score. That's not necessarily the case because there are four other factors or pillars that hold up your credit score, not to mention ancillary things like judgments and filing bankruptcy and collections and things of that nature. But yes, you've got to make your payments on time. That's the number one. That's the number one criteria for you. So that's your number one pillar. Is that just that you need to make sure you make your payments on time. It's 35% of your credit score. The next one is credit utilization that I just mentioned earlier. It's 30% of your what makes up your credit score as well. So that's the second pillar for you. Is credit utilization. Now let me pause and say something. The credit utilization typically is referring to revolving credit. So it's your credit cards. What is the utilization on that? They want you to be at 30% or less to get the most points. Now, that's okay if you're at 50%. It's all right if you're at 75%. You definitely don't want to be at 85, 90, and not 100 and not over what your credit limit is. You don't want to do that. So, actually, let me pause right there, right quick. Oftentimes, if you look at your credit report, you'll see, and you're looking at a credit card, you say, let's say, for example, you have $1,000 limit on your credit, on your this particular credit card. But at one point in time, say you spent just short of the $1,000, but once they added the interest on there, you were over your $1,000 limit. So on your credit report, it'll say high limit, and your high limit could be, let's say, $1,100. That's your high limit. That is a bad indicator for lenders and people that are looking at your credit. So if your score is marginal and you're barely making it, that might be something that they will use against you because you went over whatever your high limit is. Here's a way to remedy that. So now that you've gotten back on track, maybe it only happened one time. Now you've got that, you've got that balance down, and say it's at $500 now. So you're at a 50% credit utilization. Ask for an increase. You get a credit increase, then your credit increase, let's say they give you 500 more bucks. Now your limit is $1,500. It'll still show your high balance as $1,100, but then you never went over that far as the system is looking at. If you're somebody's a lender and they're looking at your credit, then they're looking at it and they're saying, hey, this person hasn't gone over, that's not an issue for them at all. So you haven't gone over your limit like ever. So at the same time too, if you have a card and basically maybe you just got a card because you want to, help build your credit, right? So you do want to use the card, but if it says your high limit is only $100 and you've got, a $2,000 limit and your high limit, the highest you've ever spent or the most you've ever spent was $200, that's something else that they'll be looking at to say, hey, we're not really sure how responsible this particular person is because they haven't used that much credit at all. So only these things only fall into place when you're being evaluated by an actual human being that's looking at your credit and looking at everything that's going on to decide if they're going to lend you money or the amount of money that you want. Those are some of the factors that fall into you being approved or being denied for credit. So the third pillar, when it comes down to it, is your length of history. How long have you actually had credit? How long have you had some credit at all? So the longer the better, of course, right? And it's not the entire time. I was looking the other day. I think my oldest credit card is like 27 years old, something like that, right? But that's not my length of history. My length of history is somewhere around 7 or 6 years, something of that nature. So it's really an average how long you've had them, and how short you had them, and they take everything in between and they make an average out there. So your length of history is 15% of your credit score. The next factor would be your mix. What kinds of credit do you have? Do you have revolving credit? Do you have installment credit? To have both is better, because the credit bureaus are just really trying to judge how does this person really evaluate their credit situation. Are they responsible with all types of credit? So then that's 10% of your credit score. And the last 10% of your credit score, the last pillar, are the inquiries. They're 10% of your credit score. Each inquiry hits your credit report. Typically, you can see 2 to 10 points coming off. It's almost like that's what you pay, if you will. You pay 2 points, you pay up to 10 points for getting an inquiry. Inquiries are when you're trying to get credit from someone. If you're trying to get credit from someone, that inquiry is a hard inquiry. And yes, it does count against you, and you might get knocked 2 points, or you could be knocked as much as 10 points, depending on what you're doing. So those are the 5 pillars of credit. You want more information of that? I can't stress it any more than this. Go get my ebook on Amazon. You can get it today. You can get it right now. You can read it in an hour and a half. You can read the entire thing, but you'll have a lot of knowledge about what's going into your credit score. So go to Amazon. It's called 5 Pillars of Credit by Kevin King, the 800 Credit Score Man. Go get that ebook and start your reading today. As a matter of fact, all of you people that are out there going to Popeyes and sitting in those long lines, you can download the book on your phone, on your tablet, on your iPad. You can download it, and probably by the time you get your food, or at least you get to the speaker box to tell them you want that sandwich, and they tell you that they're out of them, you could have read most of the book in itself. So you guys go out there, you get 5 Pillars of Credit by myself, Kevin King. All right, what's next? So how often do credit scores change? Now, that's a good question. It's a really, really good question. So the more activity you have, the more often that your credit score is going to change. Now, seemingly they fluctuate for no reason at all. Sometimes they go up a few points. Sometimes they go down a few points. And a lot of people say, I haven't done a thing, but why did it change? So many factors go into the formula. That I couldn't tell you exactly why things change. Now, sometimes if you like we just talked about inquiries, you get a bunch of inquiries, it's going to change, right? So that credit score is going to change because you got an inquiry. You add a new account, it's going to change because you got an inquiry. You pay down some debt, it's going to change because you got an inquiry. Oftentimes, if you're paying down credit card debt and you move from 40% down to 32%, then it's going to change for the positive for you. You add an account to your credit report. You had an inquiry. You got some new debt. Again, they're risk averse when it comes to your score. Your score is probably going to go down a little bit. Something that's really backwards to me is you pay off your vehicle. You pay off your vehicle, shows on your credit report, your score might go down a little bit because now you're messing with your mix. We just talked about the mix is 10% of your credit score, right? You're messing with your mix, so it could change. Now, for you to go on and take a look at it, it's not going to change daily. Now, some of these people, like Credit Karma, we're just talking about them in VantageScore, they're promising updates every 7 days. Yes, they have the ability to get in the system and be able to, recalculate your thing every 7 days. Some places do 14 days. You'll be able to do that. They're able to do that too. But FICO updates once a month. I don't know when it is. I don't know if it's the 15th. I've heard it's the 15th, the 21st, the 23rd, whatever day of the month that they actually update, then your score could possibly change. If you're not doing anything at all, it might not change at all. Maybe it'll change 2 points here or there and whatnot, but typically it's relatively stable, if you will, when it comes to FICO, unless you're making moves and you're doing things on your credit. So there you go. So that's how often that your things change. So credit range. So what's a good score? What is a good score for you? So the credit range on all of these are 300 to 850. So 300 being on the lower end, 850 being a perfect credit score, right? So that's what the range is. And what's a good score? A good score, well, let's put it like this. An excellent score is 750 and above, generally speaking. And I say generally speaking because you could be going to a place where maybe their typical customer has, say a 690 score. Their typical customer. So for them, you go to a place like that, their typical customer is being at 690, A good customer for them could be at 720. So if a good customer for them is at 720, then that's excellent for them. You get the best rates that they have. Then boom, then it's 720 for them. But generally speaking, 750 and above is excellent. Is an excellent score. 700 to 749 is good. That's good. Then if you drop down under that, you drop 650 to 699, then that's where you have your fair credit. That's where fair credit is. Anything under that is considered bad or poor credit. So if you're under 600, you've got bad or poor credit and you need help. You need help to move things along for you. I can help you with those things. So give me a shout. Email me 800@creditscoreman.com. Give me an email right there. Let's get on my schedule so we can talk and I can help you improve your credit score. All right. So those are the credit ranges for you guys. What is the score range for Vantage? Same thing as it is for FICO. They're doing 300 to 850 as well. Now, since I'm here, recently I was posting my credit score and whatnot, and my score was over 850. It was like 869 or something like that. So let me explain that a little bit, and I did before, but let me explain that portion, how it got to be over 850. So when we talked about things being specific, mortgage specific scores, vehicle specific scores, well, that particular number comes from a credit card. So that number comes from a credit card. This particular place goes from 250 to 900. You don't ever have to really worry about that, but they run from 250 to 900 when it comes to looking at your credit card and your score dealing with credit cards. So that number that I have, which whatever it was, 863, 869 or whatever it is, came from the credit card portion of that. That's where that score came from. So yes, those are your score ranges, 300 to 850, like we just mentioned. So let me mention this, and you might have never heard this before, and you definitely haven't heard it from me. Your lenders, whether it's mortgage or bank or, personal loan place and what have you, they put you in categories. Right? So if you've ever heard the word subprime. So subprime means that your score, whatever this particular company you go to, that your score is not necessarily all the way up to par for them. So you're subprime. Subprime basically means for you, and all you should care about is that translates to what your interest rate is going to be. So your interest rate is higher if you are a subprime person with a subprime credit score. So your interest rate is higher. Then you can be near prime. So then you're right there you're in the good category. So you're near prime, not quite excellent. Maybe that's fair, really, when you're near prime. And then your prime customers. So you got your prime customers that are really good. They're on the higher range of good. So good 7 to 749. So maybe they're 730, they're 725. Those are your people that are prime. And then you got super prime. Super prime are going to be the excellent people. They got 800 credit score, it only goes to 850. So they got the 800 credit score. And those people, and maybe a 780 to 850 or whatever, but those people are absolutely going to get the best rates. So that's what oftentimes banks and lenders have their own internal things that they do, and that's kind of how they categorize us all there. So that's what's a good score for you guys. Is there just one credit score? No, I just explained. No, there's way more than just one. Some people say there's 1,000 different credit scores out there, and I guess maybe there could be. But there are different credit scores, even with TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, and then you got FICO, and you got TransUnion, and the industry-specific stuff. Then yes, there are way more than just one credit score. So if you are thinking, if I go to this particular place and they pull my credit, and maybe they're using TransUnion, and I go to another place and they pull my credit and they're using Equifax, that it's going to be the same score, it's not going to be the same score. TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian are all independent companies. They may be looking at the same data, but again, their systems may be a little bit different. They may tweak a little bit, so your scores could definitely be different in there. So a question that I had never actually heard was, like, who calculates my credit score? Well, all the talk that we talk about when it comes to credit scores, who actually does the calculating on them? Well, the lenders don't. So I did have somebody say, well, why is this lender, so difficult to deal with and whatnot? Well, it's not really that particular lender. They're position on what a credit score should be, or a good credit score for them or somebody that they'll actually lend to may be different, but it's not actually on the lender. So those credit scores are calculated